This is the Mettle podcast, and I am your host, Coach Thomann. I'm a former athlete, teacher, coach, and athletic director that switched careers after surviving cancer and a stroke in the fall of 2020. But I'm also a dad of a son and a daughter that were successful high school athletes that went on to college. Now I use that experience along with my ICF coaching certification when helping teams, coaches, and athletes from all over the country. Each week, I will pose a specific question that will help coaches of all types better understand mental toughness. In the Mettle podcast, coaches will learn to help their athletes overcome adversity without being the adversity they need to overcome.
Coaches, do you dream of guiding mentally tough athletes towards a championship? Kids that are resilient, persistent, and unshaken by setbacks. Well, in today's world, those athletes aren't born. They have to be developed. Many athletes face significant challenges and risk burnout. So how do we foster that mental toughness without overwhelming them? Well, introducing the Ember to Inferno program, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. This series is designed specifically for coaches, offering a deep dive into your own journey of mental toughness and equipping you with practical tools to build confidence and belief in your athletes. Rather than just simply adding more adversity to their life, we focus on creating a strong foundation for mental resilience. You'll learn how to transform a spark of motivation into a blazing fire of toughness using techniques that address challenges like social media pressures, athletic stress, and trauma. Don't just wish for mentally tough athletes, build them. Join the Ember to Inferno program today and ignite the potential in your athletes. For more information, contact me, Coach Thomann, at Mettle Coaching. And welcome back to the Mettle podcast. I'm your host, Coach Thomann, and I'm here with my guest today, a good friend of mine and the Superintendent of Rochester Schools in Rochester, Illinois, Dan Cox. Dan, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's always a great day to be a Rocket. Got to throw that in there.
I know you do, and I know you got I know we're talking because you got a football game tonight, which is a big deal in Rochester, right? You got everybody there. I love a school on a Friday with a football game that night. It's a great atmosphere. I love it.
Yeah, nothing like it. You know, in August, in early August, my office sits right by our field house and our football practice field, and early August, I start hearing the snare drums going and the marching band's out there practicing, and, you know, it gets the juices flowing. Start hearing the coach whistles. You're like, all right, school's coming. You know, we're here a little further north than you, so there's a little chill in the air right now. So
yeah,
it feels good. The ribeyes are cooking outside. So
it's
good stuff. Nothing like football.
Man, you can't beat a Friday night football game at home. That's just good stuff. And so a little bit on how we're going to get into this. And I mentioned that you're a good friend of mine. We've known each other since college. Millikan University, went there. You played football. So football is a big deal to you as well. I played basketball. And I think that one of the cool things I want to talk about here is we're going to talk a little bit of a couple things. You've got me doing some work with your school, but I also like talking with different individuals that do hard things on purpose. I love that conversation. So the reason I mentioned you're a football player, because you were an offensive lineman, right? And was it 2 weeks ago? It's been 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah. Just
2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, you attempted a 100-mile trail run. And when I say attempted, did you make 89 miles?
You know, trail miles are different, you know, so there's a difference between road runners and trail runners, and I do both.
Yeah.
Right? So I respect both sides of it, but trail runners, there's a thing called ish miles, right? And I never understood that at the beginning. So we're going to call it 87-ish. It was either 86 or 88, but I'm an odd guy, so I call it 87-ish. How about that?
We'll try it. We'll go 87.
It's a long way. It's from Springfield to Busch Stadium, brother.
Yeah, right. I know. It's I think that's what I want to talk about. Is not. I would love you to tell me about the race and some of the races you've done, because you've been doing some trail running and some like Spartan type races. I want to talk a little bit about those and the difficulty of those, what you get out of it. But then I also want to get into why in the world would you do that, right? So it's like a 3-part question there, and I don't know which way you want to jump into it, but I know you've got the ability to take that story and run with it. So I'm going to let you.
I do, Matt, and feel free to jump in or ask questions. The best conversations just go that way, right? And I'll start this. I'll even date you back. You took us back to college, but to show how far back we go, we're just a couple southeastern Illinois guys, and we were always you were at Noble, West Richland. Doesn't even exist anymore. I think it's Richland
No.
County, and I was
Yeah.
West Junior High, which doesn't exist anymore. It's now Jasper County. And I remember going to basketball camps, and whenever you're always the biggest guys there, you get matched up against each other. And, there was this big kid from Noble, and I always had to go against him. I'm like, who is this dude, And it was, we were actually playing basketball against each other probably when we were 10 or 12 years old and didn't really know each other, right? But in one way or another, we've been connected. And, of course, we went to college and became very good friends after college, when we had young families. A group of us all had kids about the same age, and then we separated again, and then I was, principal down in Olney with your brother, and it's just like we've kept coming in and out of each other's lives for a long time, which is, pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's like, it's interesting, man. You just how life goes different ways, and it's interesting.
Well, and just the paths we take and where we are in our lives now is really neat, And you see my journey, and I think I'm the most unlikely, today, and I don't evangelize on this, but. And part of this story I'll tell, I'm 100 pounds lighter today than I was 3 or 4 years ago. And as you mentioned, I was a college football player, and I was a college left tackle. I was a big boy, 6'5" and 304 pounds. Southern Illinois boy that liked, barbecue and good food and all of that, And today I'm probably the most, I joke, I'm the most unlikely plant-based eating, trail running ultramarathoner you're ever going to find. And how do you go from that to a guy I ran 5 ultramarathons in 5 months this summer, which has really been pretty incredible. The others were, and my wife jokes at me, I say the others were just 30-mile, 50 Ks, but I now casually talk about 50 Ks like they're a kind of easy thing, even though I really respect the distance. But I guess to part of this, why I did this, there's a 2-part story to that answer. One is kind of a professional, personal related, and the other is family related of how I got into doing these type of things. And I think it's important to know that base. I've been a school administrator for over 20 years at this point, and I've been a superintendent of schools. I'm going into my 16th year as a school superintendent, and what I say about the school superintendency is it's one of the most rewarding things that you can ever do. I love it. You have to love it to do a job like this, but it's also one of the most challenging things and one of the most challenging professions you're going to be in. Right now, the national average for superintendency tenure is less than 3 years. 30% of superintendents have 3 years or less of experience. So that you're kind of being an outlier, being 15 years of experience now, and it's gotten even harder since the pandemic. And I moved here to Rochester during the pandemic, and I'm going to have to say I was 100 pounds heavier. I had a lot of habits that I was using to deal with the stress that weren't very productive or very healthy, and I had to do some serious self-reflection. And in that, I had to have some really look in the mirror moments about what am I doing to be productive and be my best, to serve my family, serve my community, and had to make some changes. And I changed my relationship with a lot of things in my life. And I made a commitment to become fit, not just physically fit. I had no intention of becoming an ultramarathon course racer. I wanted to get fit. Right.
Was there a seminal moment? Like, was there just a moment where you're like, put you over the edge?
Yeah, I remember it was October of 20. The pandemic's what? Everything shut down 2020, right?
Yeah, 2020.
So it was October of 2020. I was doing one of these deals where I'm trying to fit into my pants like that. It wasn't working, but I was sucking in and trying to. I didn't feel good. My doctor was talking to me about being on blood pressure medicine. He was talking to me about being on cholesterol medicine. I was not happy. I was stressed all the time. Wasn't there for my family the way I needed to be because I was always working in my head, and I knew that was not going to be sustainable, and I needed to make some changes. And so I signed up and I went to Orange Theory, which is, became part of my ethos, because part of that was, just start, go do something and
Yeah.
just start, and sign up before you're ready. Because if you wait till you're ready, it's never going to happen.
Yep.
So
Amen.
yeah, I went to Orange Theory, right? And I couldn't run 2 minutes on a treadmill. I mean, I was done, right? I ran 2 minutes on a treadmill and was cashed. But that started, a process of becoming, um, you know, more fit, and that started that journey, during that time. And it was probably later, about 6, 7 months into that, I was doing really well. And Jen Garrison, superintendent from Vandalia, reached out to myself and another colleague and asked us to do a Tough Mudder 5K. I'm like, oh, Jen, I don't know about this, right? And I signed up for that Tough Mudder 5K, which led to another piece of my ethos, right? I started with sign up before you're ready, but then it came down to you can do more than you think you're capable of. And then the next piece was, hey, always have something on your calendar, right? You lose 100 pounds, we'll do something with it. I hadn't lost 100 pounds at that point yet, but I was well on my way. So I'm like, let's do something with it. So I did something that was hard, right? And I put it on my calendar and made it public. And it was something that was going to be hard for me. And quite frankly, it was something I was uncomfortable with, and something that scared me a little bit. And that, little did I know at the time, was the spark that led to a crazy journey where we did the world's toughest mudder last year, where I'm doing a 24-hour event and 60 miles of tough mudder, 200 obstacles. We've done Go Ruck Tough events. We've done ultra marathons, team and individual. It's just led to a crazy, crazy journey. But it really started with a guy who was overweight, not feeling great, with some bad habits. Said, let's just do something before I'm ready, and makes me nervous and a little scared.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point there when you're talking about. I'm sure you get this all the time whenever you're doing that, and people say, "Well, I just couldn't do that," and we're like, "Well, the news is I couldn't either, right?"
Right.
Like that's when you're talking about starting small, like have a big dream and have a big goal and sign up before you're ready, but you still start with small, right? There was a day you couldn't run 2 minutes on the treadmill, right? You couldn't have, like that day you couldn't have run you couldn't have done the Tough Mudder, but you worked towards it. That's the whole point.
Yeah, I went from 5K Tough Mudders to 24-hour events in a few years. And again, it wasn't the goal; it was a natural progression. And I think, I tell people, don't do what I do. In fact, I don't even know I would recommend it sometimes, right? When I'm out there running 100 miles in 98 feet. But it was about the process, and it's where my process took me. What I tell people is just start. And somebody asked me one time, they're like, "How did you get to that spot where you're running those distances, or you're able to do that?" I said, it's simple. Just start, right? It sounds corny. I put my shoes on. The first thing that I did every morning for 3 years, before I did anything else, I would get out of bed. I had my running shoes by the bed. I would put my shoes on, and it was like my brain signal, get out the door and do something. And there were days I didn't feel like it, but I would still go out the door and do my best that day. And the other thing that I think is really important in this, it's not just about physical fitness. I made mental health changes. I made nutrition changes. I made a lot of habits. And what I did was I changed the nature of my relationship with things. So one of my rules is don't ever mess up twice. Like, you're trying to follow a nutrition plan, and then you see that big bowl of ice cream. Life happens.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You eat that big. Just don't do it 3 days in a row, right? Hey, you miss your run. I never worry about missing a run today. If I had to miss my run today, okay, life happens. But the next time my run's scheduled, I will not miss it, because it's the back-to-back. We slide so often in life. So give yourself grace that life happens. Just don't do it back-to-back days and let that become a slide and a bad habit.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's easy to do, and having a good habit 1-2 days that you get away from it, it's much easier for a bad habit to develop. It just is.
Yeah. So what happened in that journey, Matt, at that time I started at 304 pounds, and for those who don't know me, I'm 6'5", 304 pounds, carried it pretty well. And everybody's like, no, you were never 304 pounds. If I show you the pictures now, you'd be like, okay, yeah, you were. And because can carry it pretty well. It's a big, strong guy. And I got down to about 250, and it plateaued a little bit, but was doing pretty well. And then during that time, that led to this journey, maybe the why. Why do you do this, and what led you to these things? my older sister, Lisa. Well, I have three older sisters. I always joke all the time that I have my father and mother, and I have three older sisters, and the one closest to me in age was 10 years older than me. So it was like it's kind of like I was raised with four moms. You learn how to listen and follow directions there, right? And my sister Lisa was a career educator. I really looked up to her. She's part of the reason I was in education, and she was a long-time principal before her retirement. And the pandemic, during that stress of the pandemic, and part of that stress that I had wasn't just professional, it was also personal, because the pandemic in a way really added to the value of my sister's life. It was the day school started, whenever we were all shut down and trying to figure out what to do. She was diagnosed with cancer. And it did end up being terminal cancer that she was diagnosed with. And I remember that conversation we had that day. And, in the adversity of the pandemic and the school shutdown, it actually allowed her to work and get to retirement, do the things she needed to do and still lead her school while she was undergoing treatments, which then allowed her to retire and have another year where she could really, enjoy life. And that added a real different perspective for me. And as I saw her going through treatments and stuff, and I'm well into my fitness journey at that point, I'm like, all right, man, I want to do something hard. I want to put it on the calendar. I want to do it before I'm ready. I want to make it public. All of these things that I live by is something that makes me nervous. And I want to do something, excuse me, but that sucks, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to run a marathon. That's why I said, I'm going to run a marathon. And I announced it, and I had a few friends that were runner buddies of mine. They're like, "Damn, man, bro, you're not a runner. You never really ran. Don't do a marathon. Take my advice. Do a half marathon." I'm like, "You sure?" They're like, "Yeah, man. Don't start out with a marathon." I'm like, "You sure?" They're like, "Yeah." And they said a half marathon is a great event. The average person really doesn't know the difference between a full and a half. It's going to be really hard. You're going to feel accomplished, so on and so forth. So I listened.
But that said, there is an enormous difference.
Oh, huge, right?
Yeah.
Huge. And, I did that. And I signed up for the Chicago Hoka Marathon, the Lifetime Marathon in May. I signed up for that event, and it was a big deal for me. And I'm really glad I ran it. In fact, it's become a very special and sentimental run for me. I still run it to this day. But I did sign up for that event. I ran it. I raised money for that event. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this, to do something hard, and that's not something I really want to do. And I went into that thing thinking, I'm going to run this one race and be done, man, because I don't see myself as a runner. I was still doing the HIIT workouts, the CrossFit type things, of lifting stuff. And Lisa didn't make it to that race. She passed away just before that run, and that's why it's a sentimental run. And I went ahead and ran that, raised some money for her scholarship foundation for that race. And when that race was over, it was, as you can imagine, incredibly, incredibly special. And that's why I still run it to this day. But something happened. I was like, I kind of liked that, right? I go, I think I'm going to keep running. I'm going to sign up for the fall half marathon. Well, then I did some reflecting. And when I was reflecting, I said, why did I really run that half? And I'm not being critical, because it was the right move, and I'm not disrespecting the half marathon, because I still run it to this day. But the reason I ran for that half marathon was the same reason I'd gotten in the shape I had gotten into prior to getting back together. And it was because I did something I knew I could finish. I wasn't nervous about running a half marathon, Matt. I knew I could finish a half marathon, even if I had to crawl that sucker. I knew I could.
Yeah, you were gonna make it happen. Yeah.
I didn't know if I could finish a marathon, and I didn't know if I wanted to make that public and fail publicly in front of my friends and family and all these people counting on me. And also, I kind of let others lower my expectations, because I was going into it to run a marathon, and I let other people say, "No, man, let's do this," and they had good intentions, right? But I let other people's expectations lower my high ones. But the real truth of the matter was, if I'm, just being straight up, was I wasn't sure I could do the other. And I said, never again will I avoid something that I'll lower my expectations, or avoid something that scares me. And, if I fail publicly, that's not a bad thing. And there's things to teach and learn. No. And I mean, we can talk about it, but I just technically failed pretty publicly here a couple weeks ago.
Well, and that's the thing, is I think that the fear, it doing it publicly, the fear of, I don't even know if it's expectations, or you just don't want to, I don't know, even if you fail at 100-miler, right? There's a little bit in there that's like, when you put it out there and then you fail, you always open the door for people. Like, you're worried that people are going to say, yeah, well, I knew he couldn't do it. Well, they can't even get it off their couch. Right. So what, but yet we have those thoughts that we let the things that people might say and probably aren't even saying are like, they keep us from doing things. Right. Parents, is your athlete ready for the upcoming sports season? They might have the strength, the speed, and the skills, but without confidence, they could still struggle when the game is online. Skill and strength are great. They're necessary, but they're not used to their full potential without the right mentality. Confidence is key. It's the key to unlocking that full potential. And at Mettle Coaching, I offer personalized sessions designed to build the confidence your athlete needs for a successful season. My proven techniques empower them to perform under pressure, both on the field and in life. Don't let a lack of confidence hold them back. Book a free session today and discover the power of confidence. Visit the website and get started on the journey to a more confident and successful athlete with Mettle Coaching. You can't make chicken salad out of chicken feathers, or perhaps you've heard it or even said the other version. Regardless, good coaches should not blame a lack of success on the players they get to coach. It's a lame excuse, and I'm sorry if that ruffles your feathers. But it's your job as a coach to develop your players. If your athletes lack skill or mental toughness, it's your responsibility to develop it. But how do you make today's athlete tougher without risking breaking them? Well, Mettle Coaching now offers professional development for coaches, explaining how to do just that. The program is called Ember to Inferno, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. It teaches real tools and tangible methods that are proven to increase the mental health and toughness of athletes. The program is available as an in-person seminar or as virtual small group coaching. Don't wish for mentally tough athletes. Build them. Contact Mettle Coaching today.
100%. And I think it goes back to, and I'm going to repeat some things, but they're worth repeating. So where I'm at today and why I ran that 100-miler is, and why I do it, and I hope a little piece of it inspires others, but it's also for me is you can do more than you think you're capable of. And I say, sign up for something before you're ready. It doesn't have to be a physical event. It can be anything. I mean, you do jiu-jitsu, right? But it could be something that's not even physical related. Always have something on your calendar. Make sure it's hard. Do something that makes you uncomfortable. Get comfortable being uncomfortable and make it public and just start. There's a lot to that. Right now, if I'm not walking the walk, people will call me on it. I have the greatest accountability system there is, because I have people all the time say, man, I really appreciate seeing what you're doing. What you're doing is helping me. The things you put out or the things you have done have helped me. And I've had people do it publicly. I've had people do that privately, but that's more of an accountability system.
Yeah.
For me, and we just are capable to do a lot more. And it's really, I've never been better. And it's not just the physical piece to it. There's the spiritual, there's the mental, there's a lot of things to it.
Well, what I like to say about doing hard things, and I'll get off just a thing that I love to say, is that if we purposely practice intentional adversity, we're more ready for the life's mandatory adversity. And mandatory adversity is coming. Like, you can't avoid it, right? It's happening, right?
Matt, so you took the words out of my mouth, because I was prepping for this. One of the things I wrote to myself was intentionally put yourself in difficult and uncomfortable and adverse situations, because it prepares for you to deal with it in life. I'm in one of the most stressful, adverse professions and unpredictable professions you can ever imagine, right? And so in a weird way, when I put myself in those difficult and uncomfortable situations, it really pressed me to stay level when difficult stuff comes up in my professional or personal life. When I'm out on the trail, so when I was doing that 100-mile attempt and I was out on the trail, it was such a technical trail. I was running with headphones, and 6 hours in, I'm like, I got to ditch the headphones because I have to concentrate on this.
Yeah.
There was so much rock and it was so difficult. So so it's just you and the trail. That was around probably the 20-mile mark. I had to ditch the headphones. I ran to the 50-mile mark before I was allowed to have a pacer. That's a lot of silence. Right? And even with the pacer, I'm like, y'all, I'm not really wanting to talk. Just do this thing. And multiple times in that race, and I've done it before, but not to this level. There was times you had some real moments you had to talk to yourself, and I was like, this will pass, this pain will pass, this feeling will pass. And that's natural. Everybody realizes that, like, you're going to have the pain moments. But the thing I learned on that race was when I felt good. There was times, name the mile mark. I remember it, 66 miles. One of my best miles, it was a 1.5-mile stretch because I got to get out on some gravel road, which was most of it was single track all over, all kinds of rocks and horse tracks. I got on a single track gravel road at 3 a.m. and I ran a 10-minute and 15-second pace. And that was at mile 66.
Yeah.
And I was running down that, and I said to myself out loud, I felt great. And I'm like, this will pass.
Yeah.
The good time is going to pass too. And brother, by mile 70, it passed, right? And I was hurt locker deep. So, that's one thing I think you talk about. Put yourself in those uncomfortable and adverse situations out there, because the bad and the good is going to pass. But that's life too, man.
I agree. That's just, if you can put yourself in those tough situations, the things you have to face in your job they don't bother you as bad, right? Like I honestly was thinking about this morning. I was in class this morning and I was rolling with a black belt who outweighs me by a fair amount. And so, I mean, he got me in a side control and had me in a really bad spot. And honestly, the natural reaction is to the anxiety, to freak out. And after doing enough, you can pause and go, okay, this hurts. This sucks. But what do I need to do to get out of this situation? Now, it's taken me a while to get there. But when you can do that in a situation like that, you can do it in your daily life. What do I need to do to get out of this situation? What can I do to help my situation? What's controllable? What's not, right? And I wish everybody would do it, but I don't know if I want to say feel sorry, but for people who don't put themselves in any bad situations on purpose, it doesn't surprise me that they struggle with a lot of the adversity they have in their job, in their life, their relationship.
And you talk about that 100, right? So I think it was August I saw you, and I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I can do it, but I'm gonna try. And so one of the things I learned out there, I learned a lot. I'm still unpacking that run. And, I'll be very frank. I probably should have done a 60K first, right? A straight 60K, or not 60, 100K, 60 miler. I probably should have done that first, but I knew I could do it. I don't want to disrespect the distance again, but I knew I could run 100K. I've run that before in a tough mud or just different time frames and stuff. I was like, I can do that. So I wanted to go to that uncomfortable place of that 100-miler. And I did. And so, I get out there, and it was 95 the first day. And the second day when I went down, it was 98. And when I say I went down, right? There was no more running. And what got me though was at nighttime, I don't think it got below 78 degrees. So there was never a cool off. And I got to the point I couldn't eat anymore, and I got behind on my calories. I was drinking liquid calories, but in reflection, I didn't keep up on my calories and got too big of a calorie deficit, combined with that just long. At this point, we're probably 27, 28 hours into heat. And it was it was around, we'll call it 87-ish, but somewhere around there. It was a little under that because I had to go 4 more miles to get off the trail. But I leaned on my track poles and I looked at my pacer, and I started getting tunnel vision, and I saw black spots, and down I went. And I don't remember much after that, right? And I looked at my pacer, but I remember this. I looked at my pacer and I said, are we going to finish this run? And she said, no, we've got a new goal now, and it's to get you off this trail and get home.
Yeah.
That was a hard moment, man. It was, because I'd trained for that thing, and I'm a competitor. It was hard. So I didn't know how I was going to react to that afterwards. But I'll tell you, since then, like I feel really good and accomplished, because my goal was never, and my satisfaction was never the 100 miles. It was the process to get there. And the process I used over 8 months. And I've been so focused on the process. I know I am going to run 100 miles, Matt. It's going to happen. I know I can do it. But it's like, it's the process. And I look back, I became closer to my family. I grew spiritually. I grew. My mental health improved, my physical fitness, my discipline, and my habits of my life changed because of this experience. If I would have just focused solely on the 100 miles, I would have looked at it as a failure, but I don't. because I knew there was an a possibility I wouldn't get it. And it was when I was walking off the trail, there was a gentleman, Kelly. He looked like ultra marathon man, and he bound up the side of this big steep hill to come get me, and looked like a mountain goat running up this hill. And as we were walking off, he's like, "Hey man," he goes, "I had to bow out of this thing last year at 88 miles." And I'm looking at that guy like, that guy had to bow out. I'm feeling
Yeah.
good. And then of the 3,500 mile runners, 7 of us finished that race.
Yeah.
And it was a tough run. So I was happy that I focused on the process and not the destination, because that really helped me. And again, that transfers into life too. We better enjoy that process.
Oh, it's the same thing I work with coaches, with educators, whatever you have. Like if you are only focused on the winning and the success, you're only happy in the moment you get that exact success, that exact moment. But then that is so fleeting, because then you're just looking for the next one, right? Like you see all the time with the people that win big games and stuff, and they're just worried about the next one, and they don't even enjoy that one. You have to enjoy every piece of it as you get there.
Here's a great story. And I told you to ask me about this. I don't even know if it fits here, but it's a great story, and I wanted to tell it. It's so gross, but it's also funny. So, but I think it's trail running, right? And there is a lesson to be learned in this too. 2 lessons probably, or I'll let you decide what the lessons are. My wife and I, Julie was my pit crew boss. I had an incredible crew, and people this was not, everybody sees running as a solo sport. Not this. This was a team.
No, you need help.
I had Julie as my crew chief. I had Melanie Reynolds out there. I had Kristen Humphreys as superintendent, Jennifer Garrison as superintendent that came and paced me. And these people dropped everything they were doing to help me achieve a goal. There was nothing in it for them. They dropped everything they were doing to help me achieve a goal. My wife had to pick up a lot of slack for me for 8 months to help me achieve this goal, which is really a humbling experience. And I'll always be in debt to them for that. But one of the things we said we were going to do out there on the trail was have mini celebrations. Nothing crazy, but like, at the half marathon mark or the marathon mark or the 50-mile mark, have these little celebrations that I was going to do or recognize. And so, I'm trucking along, and it's probably, in the mid 90s at this point. I hit the marathon mark. And this is the easiest section of trail. And if you know anything about trail running with roots and rocks and things like that, if you're not careful, you can fall. Mm-hmm. I'm proud to say I only fell twice on this course. And in the 80-plus miles, I only fell twice. But both times I fell, and I'll come back to this, both times I fell, it was on the same section of course, and it was the easiest section of course.
Yeah.
But this first time I fall, it's the marathon mark. I'm out on the trail for the marathon mark. And I'm thinking, man, when I get into the pit, my wife, we're going to do a little mini celebration. I wonder what that is. Well, this is a nice little section of trail. It's flat. It's got soft pine needles. There's no rocks. There's no roots. So I'm just cruising, right? And I look ahead, and there's a lot of horseback riding that goes on out on this course. And I see the biggest pile of horse manure I've ever seen in my life. And it looked like a hubcap. And I'm staring at this thing. I'm looking at it. And the next thing I know, I'm down. And when I'm kind of used to falling the right way. So I lean into the fall. Yeah. And I'm down. And the first thing I do if I ever fall on the trail, I'm like, okay, is anything broken? Is there bones poking out anywhere? My And I was like, this is the softest landing I've ever had. Oh, man, tell me. And I rolled over, and my shoulder went right into the pile of that horse manure, and it went from my shoulder to my hip where I slid through it. And I laughed. I just laid there on the ground, and it was the exact,
how can you not?
It was the marathon mark. It was the exact marathon mark. I looked at my watch. I'm like, well, that's a celebration. I just fell in a pile of manure in the marathon mark. And I got up. I had like 6 more miles to go on this section of trail. I ran 6 more miles in 90 some odd degree heat with horse manure from my shoulder to my hip. And I'm laughing out loud like an insane person. I'm like, my friends are out there on the golf course. They're on their boats. They're at the pool. Here I am having fun running in this pile of horse manure, right? And I'm like, I just laughed. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing out here. And it was just one of those moments that was fun on the course. But, later I fell on that same section of course. And I was thinking about this, and maybe this is a stretch of connection, but I told you how much you had to concentrate on that trail. And I did relate this to life. Was I fell twice on the easiest section of course. Mm-hmm. And it's because I quit paying attention, and I let my guard down, and I got relaxed. And I tripped on something I didn't see. And I ran the most technical pieces of that course and never fell. And I thought, that's really another good metaphor. When things are going easy, Don't let up. Make sure you still are paying attention and taking care of the things you need to take attention to, or you will get tripped up.
Yeah, it's I can't think the song, but there's a line I like lately in a song that says "Small vices kill big dreams," right?
Oh, yeah.
And
100%.
and that's right, and it's a big part. Like, you think it's the easy stuff, but that's just it. It's like getting up the easy stuff. A lot of little easy things, are what you have to do the big things. And it's the same thing when they talk about trail running. It's from that book. Oh my goodness, I can't get him with the Tarahumara and the whole Born to Run, where they talk about if you're out on a trail and you're running and you're trying to decide between one step or two, make it three, right?
Yeah,
like
100%.
pay attention to the little things. And I don't think that's much of a stretch at all. Especially when the payoff is landing in a big pile of horse manure. That's pretty obvious, right? That's a lesson there for you.
And one of the things I've seen too, but I've seen it pay off into my family, and that's the number one is my wife, my kids. I have 3 children, Alexis, Silas, and Eli, and being a role model for them, and I see them picking up on things. They're not, Sai, he's nuts, man. He does all kinds of crazy stuff physically and stuff, but they're not necessarily out there running ultra marathons, but they're seeing the things I'm doing, and it's translating into their lives and their habits, which is it's a great feeling as a father, to be able to influence your kids that way in a positive way. And I think back, to my younger days, and that's not what I was doing. That's not the habits that I had, and so I feel good that I'm being a role model in a different kind of way as a father for my kids too, let alone to other people out there. But that's really what's most important there. In that piece, and just bringing some balance, a lot of balance to the life, or good fit to the life.
How's it made you better at your job?
It's besides the adversity piece that we talked about, just learning how to deal with adversity and knowing that the good and the bad times will pass. There's something that I did before all of this. I called it the 2-minute drill, and I would always say, this issue that I'm dealing with right now, is it going to be a big deal, or will it matter 2 minutes, 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years from now? And I use that as an assessment. Well, how big of a deal is this really? But what I learned early on is that usually the things that amped me up the most and got me most upset were things that weren't going to matter a couple days from now or a couple weeks from now, right? And so, I took that into this endurance life that I do now, all these endurance events, and putting myself in these adverse situations obviously helps me deal with the adversity of life or adversity on the job. But I think specifically, it's made me prioritize things differently. And when I said, I'm not a big believer in, I'm going to quit doing something, I'm going to quit eating chocolate, or I'm going to quit drinking, or I'm going to quit what you hear all the people doing. What really resonated with me was, I'm going to change the nature of my relationship with X. So like my diet, I'm not on a diet, but I've changed the nature of my relationship with certain foods, or I've changed the nature of my relationship with certain habits, which has then led to some really good habit development. And I would recommend to anybody, if you like, Atomic Habits is a well-known one, but there's
great book
that I would recommend that people really look at. And I think at that part, by changing the nature of the relationship with those things, I also changed the nature of my relationship with work. And I had to do an analysis of am I being productive? Am I focusing on, things that matter, or am I focused on being busy? Because sometimes, I can answer, if I wanted to, Matt, man, I could be on email for 3 days straight and be really, really busy, but not get anything done. But tell you, hey, I worked hard today. Or am I going to focus on the things that matter? And so I use that same process in ultra marathon running or endurance events of, let's look at the process and let's take things one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, aid station to aid station. Well, it's the same thing at work, and then eliminate distractions. So I will tell you, I don't live on my email, so I'll miss some, right? I tell people, hey, if you don't hear a response from me, you may want to get back to me, because I'm focused on the big rocks and things that matter. And I have the luxury of doing that in my job. I'm not like you who relies on clients for that, but I try to focus on the big rocks and what matters, and not get caught up in distractions and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about, I love what you talked about, your diet and what you say I'm not going to eat. And I think that a lot of people do that idea. And I work with clients all the time, and they say, they want to tell themselves, I'm not going to do this. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't do that. And what they don't realize is that's a negative mindset,
100%.
right? And it's the idea that, like, well, if you're a golfer and you have the habit of slicing, right? The last thing you want to do going up to the tee box is think, don't slice, right? Because you're probably going to slice, right? And if I was there with you and I was saying that as you're going up the tee box, you can be like, well, stop, right?
Right.
And when we try to tell our things we aren't going to do, it puts it out there, right? It starts that your brain goes ahead and starts that pathway towards doing that, right? And I think that when you're talking about changing the nature of the relationship, it's not about thinking about what you don't want to do and what you don't want to have happen. You think about what you do want to have happen. And then you start looking at, as you said, you look for the little victories and the things that you're doing right. And I know it sounds like it's the same thing, and I'm telling you it's not, right? Changing your mindset around situations and things you're going to do or not do, and eat, not eat, it really changes.
Well, something that in my journey that really taught me that, I did 75 hard, and then after 75 hard, what a lot of people don't know is there's the Live Hard program, which is 3 more months. There's 3 more 30-day cycles of that. And I did 75. 75 hard is not a weight loss program. It's not a physical fitness program. It's really a mental toughness and habit and discipline program. And when I got done with 75 hard, I really did see a lot of good habit changes. But then I took a 30-day break and I saw some things slide back. But once I got done with the Live Hard program, things were pretty embedded. And one of the things I learned in that a lot of people don't talk about is giving yourself grace, and life happens. So what I love, my daughter's doing 75 hard right now, and she was out on the trail and sprained her ankle bad. Her biggest stressor was she was going to fail and have to start over. And I'm like, that's life, right?
Yeah.
If you fail, you start over at day one. This program's teaching you about life. And so what I learned in that and what I practiced today was, if I've got a goal that I'm working toward, like, again, running. When I'm looking at the course of training for 8 months, if life happens and I miss one run, that's not going to make a difference in my success on race day, right? But I make sure I never miss it twice in a row, because that's when we start to slide and snowball. A good example I like to use, this is how I learned it. I did that Live Hard program, right? Well, I thought I'd really done my homework and done my research, but I missed one key critical part, which was on phase 3. I started 75 hard on January 1, like a lot of people do. Well, I was timing up phase 3, and I was going to do it at this sweet spot between October and November. So I was done before Thanksgiving, and I could enjoy the holidays, right? I could enjoy Thanksgiving, I could enjoy Christmas and the whole 9 yards. And then I always go back and re-listen to the podcast that talks about 75 hard. And while I was listening to that, it said, hey, you can do phase 75 hard, then phase 1, you can do it whenever you want. Then you got to take a 30-day break and do phase 2. And then phase 3 is the only one that has a strict timeline. It has to end butting up to whenever you started 75 hard. Phase 3 is the only one that you don't get to start over if you fail. And that's why they butted up to the start of 75 hard. Well, that meant over the course of Christmas, the month of December, I had to be strict, man. My diet had to be strict. I threw a fit. I threw a little tantrum, right? And something happened. I was really, really clean during the month of December last year. And I learned, and I was really pretty clean in November. It was the catalyst for me getting in some of the best shape of my life, because I didn't realize over that 6-week period of Thanksgiving and Christmas how much progress I was destroying. A year's worth of progress was destroyed in 6 weeks, physically, because I wasn't working out the same. I was eating horribly, right? You're just enjoying the holiday cheer, right? And then I'm like, I didn't miss anything, and I still had a good time, and I just changed some habits. So I learned a lot there in that process. But again, if I slip up, I just make sure I don't slip up 2 days in a row.
No, I think it's that whole thing of putting yourself through these hard things on purpose just to see what you can do and see how it's going to affect you. And I think people find out that they like what happens on the other side. So it's really good.
You learn how much you compromise.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
that's true.
I had a buddy of mine. This was a good buddy that I could real talk with. Right. But he reached out to me recently and said, "Hey, I'm going to do 75 hard-ish, but I still want to have a life." And I said, "Man," and I knew I could talk to him this way. I said, there is no ish. You either do it or you don't. And it doesn't matter if you're doing that or anything else in your life." And I said, this is why you're in the position you're in, because you're always making compromises and excuses. Quit compromising yourself and just do it, and do it right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, don't do it. And I think a lot of times we do make compromises and excuses for ourselves. Something else that gets, under my skin a little bit when people, you mentioned earlier, somebody might look at me and say, "Hey, he didn't make the 100 miles. Why did he wasted all that time?" They missed the whole point, quite frankly. They're probably sitting on their couch while they're saying it.
Yeah.
But the other thing is when people look at me and say, "I don't have that kind of time. I don't have the time you do."
You do.
I'm running a school district. I have 3 children. I'm a happily married man of 25 years. I'm finishing my dissertation and I'm taking another course on coaching, right? Trying to catch up with you, Matt, right? That's really, really busy. And I said, I've got the time. I said, you know what I do? I get up earlier. When you're sleeping, when you're on your phone, there's time to do the thing. There's time. You just got to prioritize things. And you asked earlier how it changed my job. I've learned how to prioritize what matters.
Yeah. And it's hard to do. And that is a changing a relationship with your work and what you want to do, but you can do it. Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. Coaches, do you dream of guiding mentally tough athletes towards a championship? Kids that are resilient, persistent, and unshaken by setbacks. Well, in today's world, those athletes aren't born. They have to be developed. Many athletes face significant challenges and risk burnout. So how do we foster that mental toughness without overwhelming them? Well, introducing the Ember to Inferno program, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. This series is designed specifically for coaches, offering a deep dive into your own journey of mental toughness and equipping you with practical tools to build confidence and belief in your athletes. Rather than just simply adding more adversity to their life, we focus on creating a strong foundation for mental resilience. You'll learn how to transform a spark of motivation into a blazing fire of toughness using techniques that address challenges like social media pressures, athletic stress, and trauma. Don't just wish for mentally tough athletes, build them. Join the Ember to Inferno program today and ignite the potential in your athletes. For more information, contact me, Coach Thomann, at Mental Mettle Coaching. One of the things I want to get into is what really helped me is with my job and the professional development that I do is with you making your changes. I think you started to realize you see what I'm doing and we're like, hey, I think this is a good, you started to look at my programs. And I think that's what helped you decide to, hey, bring me in to work with your coaches. And I know that some of the conversations we've had, I want to hear your philosophy on why you brought me in because you did a better job of selling it than I could have.
It's not working with our young people. There's 2 parts to this question, and for people that are listening to this, and really understanding coaching and what you do, but coaching in general. coaching and therapy are two completely different things,
Mhm.
right? I think people understand that, but everybody can benefit and needs coaching. And I think today it's more important than ever. And there's really good professional coaches like yourself out there working with CEOs. They're working with families. They're working with married couples. They're working with athletes, coaches, you name it. Everybody has it, right? There's some type of coaching for somebody. And I myself have engaged in coaching um, for many years now. In my job, I'm the only. There's nobody else like me in
Yeah.
my district. And quite frankly, even in my colleagues, because school districts, while we're similar, we're different. I have nobody that I can use as a sounding board or help me bring out the solutions that are inside me that sometimes I might get in my own way. And so coaching has really helped me um, solve my own problems. They just got to help me bring it out and
Yeah.
help me get out of my own way, because usually I'm my own worst enemy. And so I really have for many years understood the value of that. But to go into why I brought you into, work with our coaches and ultimately that will benefit our young people and our student athletes. There's a couple, I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think first and foremost, our extracurricular programs in high schools are so incredibly important. They're one of the most front-facing things, or if not the most front-facing thing that we have. When you talk about your sports programs, your band programs, they're the face of your school district. They're the face of your community.
How many people are you going to have at your game tonight?
Oh man, it's going to be thousands. It's going to be 30
Thousands,
to 60
yeah.
deep on the fence, right? And the stream, our stream, it's the most watched stream in the Midwest, Rocket TV, right? People are tuning in not just to watch our team; they're tuning in to watch our band and everything. And these people running these programs, I mean, they are small little businesses that they're running, right? That are in charge of young people, and we give them very little training. All right, you talk about the old adage when you and I started teaching, it was, hey, they give you the keys and give you the book and say, see you in May. Well, coaching, that's not that way anymore. At least I hope not. But coaching's even less professional learning, right? We hire these coaches, we put them in charge of really incredibly important programs, but more so the influence they have over our young people's lives. You and I were both athletes. You and I have both been coaches. These people are so influential, and I as a father, I have one, two that are still in sports, one collegiately and one in high school. I look at their coaches as extensions of me in my home, and I really rely on them to know my boys in ways that I don't know them, and we don't give them any training. So I really wanted to make sure we brought somebody in that did something sustained, ongoing, and embedded over the course of time that helped equip our coaches to meet the needs of our young people, and these student athletes who have a lot of pressure on them. It's way different today with social media and the other pressures they have on them and the expectations that's placed on them. We have incredible success. Everybody knows about Rochester football, right?
But with that comes the expectation and the pressure.
But yeah, 100%. But on top of that, you can look at programs across our district from junior high to high school, whether it's band, whether it's art. Our band, we have 60 all-state band musicians a year. We just had a student who just graduated. She got her artwork put in the New York Met Museum of Art. I mean, our junior high a couple years ago, every junior high team went to state. It's just so that pressure to succeed and live up to the previous. It's across all things in our district, and we have a really strong tradition of excellence, right? We really do. I'm not being cocky about that, but it also puts a lot of pressure and expectation.
It does,
kids, which is a good thing, but they're also developing and learning and growing and understand if you fall short, it's okay. And there's things to be learned from that. In fact, criticism and adversity are really necessary tools if you use them properly. And so you coming in to work with our coaches is important. And I think, our coaches, what I look at them to do, wins are awesome, but at the end of the day, we forget about that.
Yeah.
Who won the NCAA basketball championship 3 years ago? Nope.
I know.
Can tell you unless you're a nut, like unless you just love it, read it, sleep it.
Yeah.
But our real role is to develop young people It's to help them see the best in themselves. It's to help, the coaching piece of it is about fulfillment, balance, and process, dealing with adversity. And I think most importantly, why we get into the roles of education, why we get in the roles of coaching, is to help others fulfill a life of purpose and service. We want a life of purpose and service, but we want to help others fulfill that same life of purpose and service. And I genuinely believe that people are ultimately, at the heart, people are resourceful and creative, and they're very, very capable. I look at everyone like they are capable of solving their own problems. They are capable of doing more than they think they're able to do. They're incredibly intelligent, creative, and resourceful. And that's how I feel about our young people. And that's what I want to be able to equip our coaches with by working with you to bring that out in our young people and themselves.
Well, it's amazing how often, if you let people understand that about themselves and help them feel resourceful and work hard and all those things you said, the more that you help them understand that, you know what happens? They actually start to win games too. Right. It's
process, man. Right.
Yeah. It's part of the process. It doesn't. Yeah. It's the wins are a byproduct of doing things the right way and in the right and with a positive mindset.
And I think back and there's still different coaching styles and whatnot. I'm not here to say one coaching style is better than another, but I think there needs to be a constant and different kids respond differently to coaching, but I do believe there is one constant. Because you've got some coaches that, man, they're really demonstrative, they're really aggressive, they yell, they scream, they da-da-da. And people will say, well, that doesn't work today. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not here to criticize that. You've got other coaches like Pete Carroll, who's the players coach.
Yeah.
That works for some people, do. For others, maybe not. Again, not to criticize it and say one thing's better than another. But I think what is the constant in that is, regardless of their style or their approach, number one, kids need to know you care, right? But more importantly, what I want our coaches to become is natural collaborators with our student athletes to help them bring out the potential within them. And notice I said help them, the student athletes, bring out their own potential, because I believe they are capable of doing that. Because if they're relying on a coach to bring out their potential, not happening. But if that coach can be a collaborator with them, regardless of their approach, and help that and see that kid as naturally creative, resourceful, and talented, they are going to help them bring out their own potential and quite frankly, be self-reliant.
Well, and that's the goal, because the coach is not always going to be around when they get, like, if they can learn those tools and those abilities during athletics in high school, man, they're set for life. But the caveat is, or the opposite is, if you're not doing that as a coach, if you're not doing that as a district, if you're not helping your kids figure out how to do that on their own and doing it, you're not sending the kids out to the world in a way that is beneficial for them.
We're rolling the dice is what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you look at the hours that coaches spend with kids, and they're spending more time. Right now, my sophomore, 16 years old, he's spending more time with his football coaches than he's spending with me. And they have an influence, and they see things, and he will tell them things that they may not come and tell dad, right? It's really important that we work with them to be able to help them grow as young people and young men. And I know you talked to Derek, earlier this year, you talked to Derek, and I don't think I really heard him talk about, and you won't hear him talk about it here. You won't hear him talk about state championships. You'll hear him talk about raising young people and developing good people. But we also want to provide the equip kids and the skills. And again, our kids have so many pressures on them. We need to help them understand, what matters. And I think the other piece of coaching, and why I brought them in, or brought you in to work with our coaches, I want our coaches, but also our student athletes and our students in general, to understand there's a power in choice.
Yeah.
And you always have a choice. You are a product of your decisions, not a product of your circumstances. Yeah. Because we can all blame circumstances. We can all
absolutely.
But at the end of the day, there is a power in choice. And again, I know I'm repeating myself, but if you look at somebody and inherently believe they are capable, resourceful, and creative, and bring that out of them and then teach them there is a power in your choice, then we're doing something. We're really making some progress.
Yeah, they start to focus on the things they can do to get out of the situation, like we're talking about, like to do things on their own,
Well,
and that's lifelong, that's long lasting.
well, and what are you going to learn when things don't go your way? What are you going to learn?
Yeah,
And I'm not here looking for sympathy at all, but I think you can kind of imagine what kind of criticism comes with my position.
absolutely, of
And
course.
I will tell you, I am better at what I do when the criticism is higher than when it's lower, because I'm sharper, and quite frankly, sometimes it's spot on. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I do need to correct this, or yeah, I do need to go on that. But just like that easy part of the trail that I tripped up on, when things are going easy on my job, it's easy to get kind of relaxed and let like missing things, right? So helping our young people understand adversity and those kind of things are really tools that can sharpen you is is very important.
Yeah, and it's what I'm all about. It's what I'm trying to do. I know in a roundabout way, that's exactly what you're trying to do in education. So we're as I figured, we're running out of time here. I really appreciate you. Well, first of all, I appreciate you having me come in to work with your coaches. I really enjoy it. I'm looking forward to continuing to do that. But I'm thanking you. But I appreciate you coming on the show and talking. It's been a great conversation, Dan.
No, I've been looking forward to this, man. I'm really proud of the work you're doing, and
Appreciate
Matt,
it.
I'll brag on your behalf. You're a guy who doesn't brag, but I'll brag on your behalf. But I'll also, especially to the school districts out there, or the parents listening, talk to your school districts and talk to your superintendents, talk to your principals or your athletic directors. And the challenge I have out there is, why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you want to put this kind of development? When we look at the awesome responsibility and time that we put our coaches and our young people in, we need to provide the professional training and support around them for that. We're all going to win. And when I say win, I'm not talking about the W's and L's. I'm talking about developing good young people and helping them, be resourceful.
If you want kids to be tougher, don't complain about it. Actually, give your coaches the tools to actually develop it. Yeah, right. So awesome, Dan. It's been a great conversation. Enjoy the football game this evening, and go Rockets.
100%. Yeah, it's a great day.
All right, you bet. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Coaches, do you dream of guiding mentally tough athletes towards a championship? Kids that are resilient, persistent, and unshaken by setbacks. Well, in today's world, those athletes aren't born. They have to be developed. Many athletes face significant challenges and risk burnout. So how do we foster that mental toughness without overwhelming them? Well, introducing the Ember to Inferno program, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. This series is designed specifically for coaches, offering a deep dive into your own journey of mental toughness and equipping you with practical tools to build confidence and belief in your athletes. Rather than just simply adding more adversity to their life, we focus on creating a strong foundation for mental resilience. You'll learn how to transform a spark of motivation into a blazing fire of toughness using techniques that address challenges like social media pressures, athletic stress, and trauma. Don't just wish for mentally tough athletes, build them. Join the Ember to Inferno program today and ignite the potential in your athletes. For more information, contact me, Coach Thomann, at Mettle Coaching. So I don't have a lot to add on that episode because Dan's a talker and we ran over time and he tells his story really well and makes his points extremely well. So you don't need much from me, but there's a couple things I want to bring up and just reiterate on something we said there. The first thing is about Dan himself. And Dan is just this perfect example of what I preach all the time now, how you really need to be putting yourself through intentional adversity in your life, because it's hard for me to explain how much it can help you with the regular daily life that you face. Everything becomes easier. It becomes less of a big deal. It helps you face your fears, helps you learn how to get through situations and just deal with the anxiety of the hard thing that you're doing, helps you with the anxiety of life. And it's just it's putting yourself through these things. And I know it seems counterintuitive, and it's like, I don't want to do that, and it seems too hard. And I get that. And it's easy for you to look at somebody like Dan, and he's talking about running 100 miles, and you go, I can't do that. And I will tell you that I've known Dan for, as he told the story, I don't know, 30 some years now. And Dan couldn't do that. And Dan wasn't that guy. He was never that guy. And now he is, and he just made this mindset shift, and intentionally decided to go do these things for the betterment of his health. I think he started that way, just his physical health, and then he quickly realized what I'm figuring out and what I'm trying to preach to people is how it helps your mental health, and how just how important that is, and how it can change everything. And I know Dan, like I said, I've known him for years, and he's changed a lot in the last 3 years, and he's just I love watching him be in charge of his district, Rochester, Illinois schools, big schools, really successful school. And it's the way he posts things, and the gratitude he shows for these teachers. And I went in there and spoke, and the vibe there is fantastic. And I think it's a top-down leadership thing, and they see that vibe from Dan, and that positivity comes from him, and it filters down. And that's the second thing, is that he brought me in, what he said about that. And he said something that I hadn't even thought of, but there you go. He's the superintendent. So he's in charge of these districts, and he's been a superintendent for a long time now. And if you've been in education, you know that, right or wrong, athletics are a big deal. Athletics are how we get people in the schools, what we see, it is, again, right or wrong, is how we measure a school a lot of times on its athletics, and how they look, and how the coaches are doing, and all these things. And he knows that, and he sees that. I mean, I've seen schools pass referendums for schools only after, the football team or the basketball team does really well. If you want to pass a tax referendum in your ballot box, win a state championship first, and then it goes easier. It matters. And Dan was the one who first mentioned to me, and he said, I realized how important that was when I started being superintendent. And then he told me he started to realize that, but we did not invest in our coaches like we could. And we're just kind of putting them to the wolves and hoping it turns out right, and leading them, sure, and doing some things, but we're not doing any professional development specifically for those coaches. And that's why he had me come in and work with his staff. Well, I'm going to continue working with him. That's the whole reason. He wants to keep investing in his staff, because he knew how important it was for his district. And when I say he brought me in to work with his coaches, if you don't know Rochester, a lot of my listeners would know, I am doing a presentation to coaches about how to handle their athletes and how to deal with athletes and do things. And I'm speaking to a staff of coaches that are highly successful. I've had Derek Leonard, who's at Rochester, on my podcast before. The guy's won something like 9 state titles in like 10 or 11 years. He's one of the best high school coaches ever. And he and his staff are over there taking notes on the stuff I'm saying, because they're always trying to get better. And I know that that's a direct result of how Dan operates his school, and wants them to be leaders and learners, and just have that gratitude and keep working on getting things better. And they were extremely appreciative of him giving that PD opportunity and having me come in. So it was completely humbling for me to do it, but I really enjoyed it. They enjoyed it. We loved it. We're making some progress on some things, and I think that's 2 things there. If you're listening to this as a coach, or an athlete, or a parent, or an administrator, anything like this, just be thinking about that, about how you can invest back in your coaches, because they make a big difference in the success of your school, and you need to be doing that. If you're not doing it through my program, get a different one. If you want mine, absolutely give me a shot. You'll hear me on the ads on this podcast. It's my Ember to Inferno program, and it's about how to build up mental toughness the right way in an athlete versus how we used to do it, where we just keep hammering them until they break and hopefully they come out better on the other side, which they don't always. A lot of kids quit, and occasionally it works, but it doesn't always work. That's an old school, and using that negativity and beat them up. And I'm figuring out that we can use that positivity and help them grow and help everybody. So it's a really fun program. It's probably one of my favorite things I do is when I get to go in and talk to coaches and do this Ember to Inferno program. So I'm just so thankful that Dan was able to come on and tell his story, talk about how important he thinks it is for administrators and schools to invest back in their coaches. So that's what I'm here for. I want to do it. If you're listening as you're a coach, send my information to your administrator, tell them you want me to come in. I love doing it. And so beyond that, thanks for listening. Thanks for liking, sharing, all those things. Can't do it without you guys, all these listeners. And it's fantastic. I really enjoy doing the whole program, and I plan to keep rolling. So for now, though, I'm your host, Coach Matt Thomann. This has been the Mental Mettle Podcast. And always remember, forge your mettle.
Thanks again for listening to the Mental Mettle Podcast, produced by Coraggio Media, sponsored by QuickCut, a video management platform for every level of play, and by Mental Mettle Coaching, helping athletes learn to face adversity in a spirited and resilient way. The Mental Mettle Podcast is created each week to help players develop more mental toughness, and that is something that will help all of us. So help me out and like and share the Mental Mettle Podcast with your friends. Until next time, keep forging your mettle.